It's okay, Mr. Goat. I'll get you a goat t-shirt too. We're going to be fine. Hello and welcome, creepy crawlies. We are about to have a fun adventure on another exciting and informative episode of Ice Cream Queens. So, without fail, let's go ahead and bring in all of my lovely co-hosts.
It's okay, Mr. Skull. We'll get you a nice wig. You won't have to be bald. Oh, hi.
Hello, my ladies.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's delightful to finally see everyone together. It's been quite a while. So,
Has been.
Yes, it has.
I am so excited to have this group back together. I feel like it's. I feel like we always have bits and pieces, but never everybody all at once.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. This is going to be a lot of fun. So, interesting things. What has everybody been doing? What has been fun in the world? What's been not fun in the world?
life. It's just been life. I've had a lot of moments where I had to go do things and things popped up suddenly without much warning. So, hence why I haven't been about much, but I'm hoping to get that a bit more settled. What about you, ladies? What have you been up to, Lauren?
I'm honestly sitting here scanning my brain like things. I do them.
I just don't know what they are.
I have no idea.
Hello, Joey the Roadie. He says woot.
Woot.
And Eli says smoke pipes. Yes, indeed. Informative.
Is that wacky tobacco?
Could be.
And Kat, what about you? What have you been up to?
I have been laying low here lately. I don't know if I slipped a disc in my back.
Oh.
Woo!
Oh, no.
Welcome to being old. So I've just been kind of. I mean, it's fine. I'm doing fine. It's just, I'm just kind of not doing all the things that I would normally do lately. So it's just a part of life. And I've talked to so many people who have done it too, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I ate like Vicodin for a year," but I've been really kind of doing it without like any kind of pain medication, and so it's just been a really odd adventure that I've been on with exploring my own mind while I have time not to move around as much, I guess. So.
And there are some injuries and illnesses that it's like all you want to do is just lay perfectly still. I can just sit here and not move at all. Oh wait, I breathed. That was wrong.
I know. That's how it was. It was like the first few days was like almost like somebody having to help you to go to the bathroom. You're like in so much pain. Like I just can't bend my leg. But other people who slip them like up higher, for me, I guess up higher would be bad too because they can't move their head or their arms. Mine is affecting like the lower half of my body so I'm just, I don't know. It's okay. It's one of those things. I think, it's just life. You go through it and you just make your way through it. And once you're done with it, you'll be able to help to coach others on their journey if it happens to them. That's all I know.
Well, I hope you feel better because
Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be absolutely miserable, and we commend you on being here. So,
well, thank you. I just move around a lot slower than I've been, so that's all.
I don't know what I've done. I'm serious. Is that strange? It's like I'm sitting there. Same thing, Lauren. I'm sitting here racking my brain. I'm like, what the hell have I done in the last 2 weeks? Yeah, I don't know.
Stuffing
things.
Stuffing things.
What? Wrong show. So I don't really have, honestly, I don't really have anything for pre-show chit chat that we're supposed to kind of talk about. I'm trying to think because the big news story that kind of broke this week, I think, is our main topic. But I don't know what's going on in the world. What do we need to share that we're aware of?
I watched Megan. Did I talk about that last show? I can't remember.
No.
Okay, there we go. It is really cute in like the most gothic-y horror way ever. Like Megan's adorable. She sings lullabies and she's so happy. She dances and she murders people and it's wonderful. I was expecting my littlest because I know this is going to sound weird. My 5-year-old is obsessed with any sort of doll related horror. She loves Chucky, loves Tiffany, loves Annabelle. Yes, I couldn't think of the right name. Anything doll related, and she's like, I want it. So when this show was coming out, or movie, I was like, oh, well, this is right up her. It's this happy, thing, and it's a doll, and it's going to be great. I was wrong. I was so very wrong. She loved the movie while it was playing. She loved the dancing and everything. It was fine until bedtime. And then she was just like, no. And I was like, all right, come sleep with us tonight.
and there's nothing that prepares you for that. You go from your child loving, because my youngest loved scary. I mean, I remember her watching creepy things at a very, very young age. And then all of a sudden it was just like a little switch was flipped and she was like, I no longer want any part of this. And then she's back to it. So, but it's just like this stage that they go through. It's like even walking into something like Spirit, she was freaked out by the animatronics. Whereas in the past, she's just like, I want to hug it. So
I'm hoping the switch hasn't been flipped too far, because like the next week she was like, can we watch Megan? And I was like, no.
All right. Well, I tell you what, let's go ahead, since I know we're kind of itching to talk about, maybe, I don't know, we have an interesting subject that we're going to discuss. Let's go ahead and bring in our special guest, Geek Gumshoe.
Good evening, ladies.
Good evening. How are you doing?
Doing quite well, thank you.
How's that hot wife of yours?
She's okay. She has a moment.
Yeah, come see, come sigh. So we actually have Geek Gumshoe joining us tonight because we have a very interesting subject that has kind of really made headlines over the past week. And that is the Madeleine McCann abduction case. And those of you who have not been following this, there's been potentially a breakthrough, potentially not a breakthrough, but we do have somebody who is claiming that she might possibly be Madeleine McCann. And so we want to take a look at this case through a couple of different avenues. We want to talk about it from the perspective of women that have families, and we're going to discuss what this means to the family, but also from the element of law enforcement. And this is where I'm bringing in Geek Gumshoe. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why we chose you?
Well, I recently retired from a career in law enforcement. I spent 26 years in law enforcement, 16 years of that as an investigator. Part of my assignment was I spent 4 years working on a task force with the Secret Service, doing dignitary protection and such, as well as the bulk of my investigative background was in the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, working on child exploitation cases through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So you're used to dealing with missing children then, and you're used to dealing with at least cases that involve minors.
Mostly exploitation. In where I was working, we didn't deal a lot with missing children cases, although we would always get your typical missing child cases where somebody had taken off in a way that their parents weren't sure where they were, and we'd have to spend a little bit of effort trying to run them down. Of course, ever since every parent started giving their kids cell phones, it made it a lot easier to track them down. But overall, we didn't get a whole lot of missing children cases in the department that I was at. We did deal a whole lot though with cases involving predators.
And that in itself is frightening. So I'm going to take a moment, since we've had a chance to introduce you, but I want to, for those of you who have been living under a rock and don't really know much about the Madeleine McCann case, this is, I do believe, a 17-year-old case in which a family from Britain was vacationing in Portugal, and this was in 2007. And while they were in Portugal, actually on a family outing, they were at a restaurant right there in the resort. Their 3-year-old daughter was abducted from her bed and has been missing ever since. The family did a very extensive search for the child. I know that it's been in the hands of multiple law enforcement communities such as that in Portugal, but it's also gone on to organizations in Britain, and nothing has ever really been found. I know that there have been ties to a SA predator who was involved in little kitty stuff by the name of Christian Buckner. If I'm mispronouncing that, my apologies. But this week there was a major situation in this case in which Julia Wandelt, who is a 21-year-old woman from Poland. Sorry, I'm having a moment. It's like I have notes in front of me and I'm like, I can't remember where she's from. But from Poland has come forth and said that she believes that she might be Madeleine McCann. And she's produced some evidence that would lead you to believe, upon initial investigation, that there is possibly the chance that she is Madeleine McCann. So let's go ahead and just kind of jump into that. I would love to hear from just anybody in the room, anybody, especially those of us who have small children, your thoughts on the abduction aspect of it. You know, how does that hit you? Yeah, go ahead, Lauren. I know you have
just going from like the beginning of the case. We're starting there and working away. Okay.
Yep. Let's talk about it.
It is very difficult. I don't know about y'all, but it is very difficult for me to not put personal feelings on cases like this. I wouldn't call myself a helicopter parent, but like if my child is in public and they're out of my sight, that's not okay. When I was looking up, everyone kept saying, oh, well, I believe one of the parents is quoted who was saying, well, it's like, eating a garden dinner in your backyard, when they were talking about the restaurant that was the tapas restaurant, which was, everyone kept saying it was a specific amount. I wasn't familiar with like how far that was. I had to look it up and like, okay, how many feet is that?
I think 180. Oh,
feet.
180. Okay.
180 feet. If I were in a crowded place that was like a vacation home, these are set up kind of like apartment buildings almost, like each area has its own little area where you can walk out to a balcony, or in this case they were on a first floor apartment, so you could just walk out the front door, and it was a tourist attraction place, lots of people, and I walked 180 steps away from that apartment, through however much crowd around the pool and over to where this restaurant is, behind the walls and the whatever curtains and there. If I cannot directly like see that door, I mean, I honestly wouldn't even do this to begin with, but 180 steps, just take 180 steps from one spot. And it's been stated, if you walk out into the woods that far away, 180 steps, you can't see where you started from. It's the same in a crowd and a bunch of vacation places and people and things, at least to me. And so it's hard for me not to be really judgy on that fact. Second thing that really bugs me, well, for convenience, so they could check on their kids and I'm quoting here, 15 minutes is what they were quoted to have been saying they were checking on their kids. And then later, when the timeline was presented, it was stretched more to like 30 to 45 minutes, if that was even the correct timeline then. They left the door unlocked for ease, so they could just walk right in off the street and see the kids. Just leave it unlocked. It's great. So it's really difficult for me with those kind of facts to sit here and be like, not put my own judgment on it. And that's all I'm going to say for that.
You've got a valid point there. Is the microphone level sounding better?
Yes.
Okay, I turned that down just a little bit. So you've got a valid point, but on the same note, I watched a documentary about this case recently, and the information that was put in front of the media and it was put out to the public is just a little bit misleading when it came to the setup with that restaurant. So what you're talking about is not where they went into a restaurant and just totally lost all focus on the room. The restaurant was actually an outdoor setting where the table that they were seated at, they could clearly see the entrance to the apartment that they were staying in. So that was one of the reasons why they were comfortable doing that, which also lends to the mystery of the whole disappearance, is because they had an entire table full of people that were sitting there, and several of them had clear visibility of the entrance to that apartment. Where exactly did that person go in and at what point? And by the standards of modern parenting, a lot of people reacted very strongly when they heard that the parents went to dinner and left the kid at the apartment. There wasn't a whole lot of clear spelling out of exactly how that went. You also have to keep in mind something else. This is a British family that are in Portugal. Portugal typically is a relatively safe country, and a lot of people do tend to let their guard down in that atmosphere. But also outside of the United States, we are viewed as being a very overly protective society because of the relative high rate of crime that most of us accept as part of our lifestyle on a daily basis. So when you're dealing with a foreign mindset, when it comes to things like that, it's a different scope of reference. And they were not really in that mindset of everywhere I go, I have to have my kid right there. So there is a little bit of a cultural difference when it comes to that, but it definitely was one of those factors that when that information hit the public, so many people were immediately just going straight to missiles that these parents either had something to do with this or were very much complicit in the level of neglect that was being practiced there. So yeah, it definitely is something where, according to our standards, we look at it and we think there's something really wrong with this entire story. But when it really comes down to it, we weren't really given the full story. And until we sit down and evaluate everything that happened and realize, it really does kind of make sense that the way that it was handled. It's a little different approach when you look at it that way.
I see Magda is kind of twitching down there at the bottom. And quite honestly, with Magda, you have lived all over the world. So I think if anybody could lend some insight as to are we, quote, overly protective? Is this a mindset that you
to a degree, yes. In the States, most families tend to be far more helicopter parents, as they say, than they are overseas. I mean, I know when I was younger, I was much more of a wild child as far as being out and about and doing things and not being in my parents' sight of all time. No.
Nobody's buying that, Magda.
Living in the sight of my parents, but we're also thinking about smaller places. Trying to explain to someone what it was like when I first came to the States, I could not absorb the enormity of this country. The idea of a place being that huge just didn't register with me. And as a result, things are not as intimate here as they are in Europe, in any part of Europe. In the UK, like where I'm from, smaller places means everyone. So they're going to be far more relaxed and a bit more old-fashioned, almost, in a way of them not locking doors and not automatically assuming that if you go down to the shops and you left your toddler in their playpen, the shops is not that far and your neighbor probably knows, and it's not as outrageous, especially if it's nighttime and they're sleeping. You think, they're in their bed, they'll be fine. I'll be back in 5 minutes, and not that bad. But, sorry, what was that?
We had a comment pop up and distracted.
I don't know what that is exactly. Filthy Frank voice. Yeah, unlock the door. Parents of the year. Sorry, I'm not getting the reference there. But, that would be me. But at the same time, because I've lived in both places, and I don't know if I'm just a control freak, I'm like Lauren. I tend to be much more of a paying attention. I want to know where my kids are at all times and see them. And so I don't know. But at the same time, when I was younger, when we went on holiday, I don't remember my parents being on top of me at all times. And there were definitely times where my siblings and I were left to our own devices, and if we were at a beach house for say, you know, we'd be down at the beach. My parents could be somewhere else doing something, and it wasn't strange to have our beach house open with no locks going on the doors, and we'd be in and out doing our things until later on in the night. So to a degree, yes, I have to agree with Geek Gumshoe in that it's a massive difference in cultural aspects of what a child needs as far as supervision goes. But I don't know, it's and that's changed even just in the past 10 years. That's changed. And it depends on where you're from in Europe. Say if you're in London, Christ, no, you're not going to leave your doors open. But if you're on holiday in a nice place like Portugal, or, you know, off somewhere, Brighton or the like, you know, it's not considered that outrageous. But at the same time, I feel like this case just felt disjointed. It felt like nothing seemed to match, and there were so many puzzle pieces that didn't seem to be from the same puzzle almost. And as you said, timelines changed a bit, things were stretched a bit, things were condensed a bit. And I don't know, perhaps it was because it spans so much time. There's got to be moments where you're not going to remember things the way you did when it happened. And in the moment, the adrenaline and the worry and the stress and such, I suppose you could say, oh no, we've only been gone 5 minutes. You know?
Yeah.
Right.
The timeline. Oh,
I'm sorry, Lauren, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Lauren.
Well, the timeline changing is one thing on itself. The other issue is there's not a clear point of this is where the abduction took case.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's I think the dad went to go check on the kids, and he had what he called his proud father moment, quoting there, where he looked at his children and then he went back and everything was fine. One of the other men who were with them, one of the other families that were vacationing with them, went to go check on the kids next. He did not go into the room with the kids. He just saw that the light was kind of on in there. The door was cracked, and he did not physically lay eyes on the kids. He just went to listen. I think he heard like one little thing, like a sigh or something, and went, all right, everything seems fine here, and left.
Right.
The next person to check was the mother of Madeleine. And when she came to check on her 3 children, by the way, I don't know if we've mentioned, Madeleine, who was 3, was there, and her 2 siblings who were 2 years old, and they were twins. So not only was a 3-year-old left alone, there's 2 2-year-olds here as well, which once again is baffling to me. But maybe it's just because, I don't know, where I'm raised. I cannot imagine leaving 2-year-olds to their own devices at nighttime. But the timeline also changed there because was Madeleine there when the second guy did his watch, when he walked by? We don't know. He mentioned there was a light on. The mom, when she came through, peeked in because she did mention that the light was brighter than she remembered it being. So she came in to check on them a little more than she usually would. And also, the window was, blinds were up, and it was either open or unlocked. I can't remember which one. So there was a window in that room where the blinds were also messed with and up. So I don't know which. I know the front door we said was faced towards where they were eating. Not sure what area of the wall that window was on, but that is also an entry or exit point. Another thing with the timeline is, sorry to just like keep talking. I did a Madeleine is quoted to have said, that day, Mommy, why didn't you come check on us when we were crying? I believe it was Madeleine. It was one of the 3 children. Why didn't you come check on us when we were crying last night? Apparently, the kids were awake. They were crying, and no one knew. And she was asking them, people heard her ask, or one of the children ask, why didn't you come to us when we were crying? Why were they awake and crying? What woke them up? Was someone scouting this area possibly for stealing the day before and unlocked that window? I mean, there's so many potential ways this could have gone down.
So I did watch the Netflix documentary, which, by the way, is very informative and it covers a lot of ground. But one of the things that they discussed is that there were many strange men in the area. and I'm not pointing fingers at men or women. I'm just saying, just in general, as said in the documentary, there were a lot of strange men in the area that there was particularly one group that was 2 men that were going door to door and inquiring about different things. So, I mean, you do have that. But on the comment about why didn't you come in? So it is a common parenting technique if you have a child who stays awake all night. And I'm thinking about the twins in particular, not necessarily Madeleine, who was a little bit older at the time, but a lot of pediatricians will tell you that if you have a child, to let them cry it out. So there's a good possibility that I didn't go in and check on you crying might have been parenting technique that they were told by their pediatrician.
You also have to consider the possibility that they may not have heard it.
True.
That the child may have been crying, but it was not audible to the point that it became concerning enough for the parent to go in and check on it. And little kids are like that. They'll point out your flaws, not realizing that you didn't understand that there was a situation going on. So yeah, I can definitely see that. But let me speak to one thing as far as the changing timelines in this story. One of the things that we do in any investigation of a major crime is we do multiple interviews. There's always an interview at the beginning where we sit people down and say, okay, we need you to walk us through this because we have to develop an understanding for what has happened so that we can deal with the immediacy of the things that need to be dealt with. Things like the fact we've got a missing child. We need to do everything we can to locate that child. The first interview is usually going to be something that we only really go back to if there are obvious things in it that stand out as saying there's something wrong with this. Because of the fact that the victim's family in a case like this is going to be really spun up. They're going to be partially blaming themselves for things that are happening. There's going to be a whole lot going on, and there is going to be no accuracy to the things that they typically are saying. In that case, what we look for is markers that we can determine either there's some deception there or there's an omission there for whatever reason. And sometimes omissions are done out of guilt for the situation, not out of guilt of something that the person has done. And down the line, we will do another interview after that person has had time to decompress and the shock of what has happened has worn off and they've had time to think about it. I would always make a victim go home for a couple of days, get some rest, get some sleep, and come back and let's sit down now and let's talk about things that have come to mind since the incident itself happened. In cases like that, a lot of times we get a very different timeline than what was initially going on. And also with the fact that we had multiple families involved in this situation, the responsibility of checking on the kids fell to several different people. And those people immediately, when someone else's kid has gone missing on their watch, they're going to start throwing people under the bus. They're going to start doing everything they can to keep that focus from being pointed at them because they know that in an investigation like this, your first suspects are going to be people that are close to this. The parents are always the first focus. Then the people that are close to it start becoming the next ones in line. And every one of those people that were at the table with the McCanns that night knew that they were going to be targets of suspicion and part of that investigation. So there was a certain amount of self-protection that was involved in some of the interviews that were going on. And it wasn't until later when they could sit these people down again and talk to them on a different level that people began to understand that every little detail really mattered in this and self-protection needed to go out the window. But the first response typically with something like this is going to be, okay, we have to help with everything that we can. Then there's the self-protection mode. Are they really talking to me because they need my input, or are they talking to me because they think I was involved? And then that third little interview, usually they figured out by that point that they're not being blamed. And now all of a sudden they're thinking every little detail that I can provide may bring Madeleine back.
Well, and you do have a situation where one of the families, I do believe it was one of the females in the group, went and checked on the kids. and recall seeing a man carrying a sleeping child out of the room. And actually, that was made into a sketch that became.
It wasn't out of the room. It was
down the street.
he was
Down the
spotted
street,
down
at
the
the end of the
street at the
street.
intersection behind
Thank
the
you.
resort that they were staying. He was walking from one side of the intersection to the other. That's where he was seen.
And he was carrying a child wearing, I think it was like pink pajamas or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. And I do recall that sketch. The initial sketch was not as detailed, but as time went on, you had people who created and developed a sketch of this situation a bit more in detail. And of course, I know that people are going to embellish as time goes on and they're going to change and stuff. Mm-hmm. So what has happened now that I think is very interesting is that we do have a woman by the name of Julia has come out and said, I do not have any recollection of my early life. I am being told that I have not been enrolled in this school system my entire life, and that I came in a little bit later, who has some similar features. And specifically, she has the heterochromia, which is the discoloration in one of her eyes, which is a relatively rare condition. And so obviously this week, the world has kind of blown up. I do believe that it was a former detective that actually sent us the information going, oh my God, have you seen this? And of course, I went down a rabbit hole immediately. So let's talk about what's developed this week. Has anybody had the opportunity to really kind of look into that and see what's going on there?
I did a bit.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I haven't.
Touch.
Yeah, no.
So when I originally heard about this, I believe it was from a TikTok, and then I started digging more into it, and I was like, what is this? She has the same genetic eye in the same eye, almost in the same placement. I'm not gonna say it is. A lot of people will say, oh, it's the exact same, and I'm looking at the pictures going, no,
Not
that's
really.
not. And she's posted a couple other photos, like there's a dimple on one side, and she says that her parents won't supply her with pictures of her youth, and there was a lot of stuff coming forward about it. Her family has since spoken up, but
Yes.
I'm going to let y'all delve into like the physical traits and all of that before I jump into what the parents have said.
Well, I have a question. Like, what if she's not? Because it'll be very simple to, DNA is just amazing. It's going to be that the facts are going to come out through DNA, obviously. But what if this girl isn't, who she thinks she is? She's just coming out and saying, I think I'm so-and-so. And her parents, might be her actual parents and just be pissed and be like, girl, like, we just didn't have a lot of cameras and stuff. And you just have a bad memory problem. Like, what if it comes out to where she's not? Then it makes the parents who are hopeful trying to still probably find their child, like, like, oh, yay. But no, it's,
Yeah, there is an aspect to that, too. Her parents have come out and they have actually said that, she's claimed things like she's never seen a picture of her mother pregnant. She's never seen her birth certificate. And the parents have come out now and said that we do have that stuff. She has taken it and hidden it from the public so that they can't see the pictures. There have been a lot of accusations from people saying that this young lady is starving for attention. She is an aspiring model who has been trying to break through and become famous. And so now there's some ideas that maybe this is her attempt to get famous.
Well, that would be terrible, because then she would be making a smear campaign against her parents to get to, I don't know.
There's definitely a danger of the fact that she is basically slandering her parents through all this. She is willing to drag her family through the mud in order to become famous, if that's the case. Now, if she is actually Madeleine, then that's a whole other thing.
Right.
But there is a lot of backlash toward her, saying that this is just an effort for her to have her 15 minutes of fame. So if She is not Madeleine. If the DNA test that has been agreed upon between her and Madeleine's family, if that DNA test comes back negative, I'm wondering if there is some liability there, if there's some other things there that are going to be a problem. And is she going to be completely shunned by her own family if that happens? Where is that going to go? Because, I mean, that's a huge risk that she's taking on as a result of all this, because she is perfectly willing to throw her family under the bus in order to get her 15 minutes of fame. Or maybe she actually is Madeleine McCann. But there's also another side to this. There are a group of online investigators who have proposed the possibility that she may be someone else who is a missing person.
Yes.
In kind of a similar scenario.
So there is, I have this in my notes. There is a missing girl. And I think she went missing back in 2011, and her name is Livia Shep. If I am mispronouncing that, I am so sorry. But she was abducted, and they have produced photographs of this girl and up-aged her as well. And a lot of the people who are that internet sleuth community feel that she looks and presents more as this person more so than Madeleine. So some of the things that I found very interesting when I started doing some research in this is, obviously she posted this, I feel like I am, I believe I might be. She's not coming out and saying I am Madeleine McCann. She is really at this point just asking for a DNA test, which Madeleine's parents, that is Kate and Jerry, have agreed to do. Now, I don't know where they are in this process. When is it going to happen? But so some of the things that have happened on her Instagram account, where this is kind of originated from, after the first initial, I am Madeleine, come watch my account, she has since posted a message that says, if you do not like me, please unfollow. I don't want, fans or followers, closed my Facebook account and TikTok so people can't make fun of me, okay? She wrote, leave me alone, which kind of goes against, but coincides with what you run into with people who are using a situation like this for their 15 minutes. Some of the things that I've seen from her family is that, now, first of all, she goes by multiple names.
She's got like 3 identities.
She's got 3 separate identities, and that she has been on numerous, treated for numerous therapies. She's on different medications. Psychologists and psychiatrists have been involved in this case. And she has now moved out of the house and refuses treatment. And her goal, according to her parents, or her family, is that she always wanted to be a singer or a model, whatever it took to become popular. So there's an element of you of me specifically, that looks at this and says, is this somebody just searching for attention? But the fact that, she does have the heterochromia, which is very unique. It's not something, there's different types of heterochromia, which could be one eye totally different from the other eye. It could be partially, in her case, and I don't know, as somebody ages, will that adjust? Because, having a freckle here as you get older might be up here, could be down here. So I don't know how that would change with the eyes as she gets older.
And that's part of what some people are looking at and saying it's different in her. It is a little bit offset from where the pictures of Madeleine McCann showed the mark in her eye being. But the fact is, it's 17 years later?
Yes.
And things are going to rearrange when it comes to that. One of the other things that she has said is that she has a freckle on her leg that is similar to one that Madeleine McCann had. But I will say this, that there's not a lot to that, because there are some freckles, and I've seen some things about this online that I thought were pretty interesting. There are some freckles that a vast majority of people have in the same exact place. So claiming that you have a freckle that's similar, right? And how many people have you seen that have a freckle like right here by their eye, or somewhere around there, and that's the only mark on their face? It's a genetic marker that is not uncommon. Now, the eye thing, yeah, that's definitely not a terribly common thing. But this young lady has it in just a little bit offset. So I would be curious to hear maybe a doctor chime in and say, yeah, this is kind of the movement that we would expect from somebody that's age 17 years forward, as far as just where it would be from the time that they were 4 years old till now.
I am going to have to disagree with one thing DL said. You mentioned that she's never come out and said, I am Madeleine McCann. You know, she's just looking for, that's the name of her account.
I didn't even think about that. But in her postings, if you look at like her postings, she does specifically say, if I am. She makes a point not to say that she is, but I didn't really think about that. Yes, you're correct. It is the name of her account.
She has actually 3 accounts named that in like different versions of it.
Well,
does she have any siblings with her family now? Are there any siblings at all? Do we know?
I believe it mentions aunts, uncles, and things like that in the reports. I haven't seen anything about
I haven't
siblings.
seen siblings either.
Last I heard, there's 2 news articles that were the newest ones. She has a psychic that she has hired to help her, who she's given her birth certificate and all of that to. She's admitted she does have it.
I was going to say that she's never seen before. Okay,
but the psychic is like saying that, well, those things are so easily forged. We just want proof, which, okay, that's fair. Fair enough. They are easily forged. The other thing is, and this is just the last updated thing I have seen, Polish police have ruled her out as Madeleine McCann.
Oh.
Completely.
Let me go ahead and point something out on that, though. Polish police, from the beginning of the Madeleine McCann incident, have been the most under fire people in this entire scenario, more so even than the family, because of the way that everything was handled. Now, if you look at the course of the investigation, it's really hard from an American perspective to look at a investigation that takes place in another country and really be able to get your head around things, because they have very different rules and very different laws when it comes to criminal investigation. And so every once in a while, a story would break in this case, and those of us in law enforcement in the United States would look at it and go, what in the crap are they even talking about? Because it was just so outrageous that things had to go a certain way. So yeah, it's weird in that way, but the police in Portugal really are not the most reliable source for information when it comes to opinions in this particular case. Until the DNA test is done, I don't think anybody can say that this is or is not this girl.
Fair.
So unless they've got something like an actual copy of her birth certificate where they're saying this is not the girl, we know who her parents are. But on that note, I will say this. If you compare a picture of her mother that she's claiming is not her mother and her, she looks a lot like this woman.
Man.
So you know how you were mentioning how the way that we raise our kids here in this country is so different because of how it is? That's, in my head, kind of how the police work is. Like, we're in this country so used to this stuff happening that there's all these protocols, and everyone, when they get this call, they're like, oh, okay, we need to do this, A, B, C, D, E.
Right.
And I think when they got this call, they were like, search party? She's probably sleeping. One of them said she's probably sleeping under a bush. Everyone go look under bushes.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't, they were like, I don't know.
But beyond that, I mean, there was an incident where they had a guy that was their number one suspect, but they can't use that word. They can't say he's a suspect until they get to a certain point, but they also have a time limit on that. And this is something that we talked about once before on this show, is that when you have a person of interest in Portugal, you only have so much time to actually identify them as such. And I'm thinking that's kind of like in the U.S. when we have a suspect and we either can arrest them or not arrest them based on the information that we have. And I think it's probably kind of a similar concept, but because our Constitution here is very different in how we proceed with criminal cases. Over there, you either have to say this dude's a suspect or you have to move on, which is just really weird for me, that you only have so much time before you start looking at a guy and that information gets into the public to actually say, this is the guy that we think did this crime. And apparently you have to really have your ducks in a row when you do that, because if you say that about the guy in order to continue the case and he turns out not to be the guy, then you've got problems on your hands. That's one of the big differences that I've seen in this case compared to American law enforcement, is that they really have to know exactly what they're doing before they're allowed to do anything with it. And that's why I'm saying that the police there are not a reliable source for saying yes or no, we think this girl is, simply because they have so many laws that constrain the very speech that they use when it comes to how they refer to people involved in this case.
Well, I also think, I'm sorry. I also think that when you start talking about missing children, we in the US are so used to Amber Alerts. We get them constantly. It shuts down all operations. I mean, it's like everybody's phone goes off. And I was watching a documentary recently, and I want to say it was in Australia, possibly, where a man had kidnapped his children, and they had introduced their version of the Amber Alert. And it was many, many years after the fact. You know, it was, I was shocked at how many countries do not have a system similar to Amber Alert to alert the public of missing and exploited children, specifically missing children. So we're used to guidelines on what to do with children when they go missing that are very different.
Right.
I mean, our Amber Alerts could be better too. You'll get a text message, it'll be like gray car, and you know, it's like everybody's got one of these, and just snap a picture of the kid and send it with the picture of the car versus a text link that nobody's going to go on to. I think it could still be done better than what it is. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, things like Amber Alert are based on legal precedent. The whole Amber Alert system had to be based around a case that was mishandled. And the reason why it was given the name is because of the person that was involved in that case. And in most countries, until you have a precedent-setting case that outlines something like this, you don't really have something where people start pushing for a law in that country. And no country really takes something from someone else's legal system and applies it to their own standards. So, you know, it's going to be called something different, and it's going to happen a different way. And in the US with the Amber Alert system, there are certain requirements to go with it. A lot of people think, you know, well, why can't we just put out information on this missing kid? We can't just put out information on a missing kid on the Amber Alert system. It requires more information than that. You have to have reliable information involving things like a car that was involved with it and a person that was involved with it. Just because someone has been kidnapped, it doesn't fall to the standards of an Amber Alert. So somebody is going to have to step in one day and say, we need something that's tighter than the Amber Alert system that puts all that information out in front of people. One of the most interesting cases with Amber Alert that I ever heard was a newborn baby that was taken directly from the mother. I won't go into the specific grisly details because it's very graphic and it probably get us kicked off of this platform.
But you can find it on Bailey Sarian's show, by the way.
Right. Yeah. The situation that was involved in this was something where the baby was taken directly from the mother. Nobody knew who took the child. Nobody even knew what the child looked like. So there was no information to put on the Amber Alert, but everybody was saying, we have to put out an Amber Alert for this. Mm-hmm. And it took a whole lot of decision making to say, okay, we're going to put this out, although we have very little information on it. And the only thing that made that happen was the particularly grisly nature of what had happened to the child's mother that caused them to push forward and put this information out. But generally, if you don't have a description of the child, a description of a vehicle, and a description of the person that took them with it, they're not going to put that information on Amber Alert.
And
I have
that's kind of a shame, you know, like, and I don't know that case that the one you're saying taken from the mother. I'm sorry, Lauren, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're good.
But as a mother, I will just, this is just me. And if either one of my kids ever went missing, I would want everybody to be able to see what my child looks like. What, you know, like I personally, at that point, I would be like, I get it, they're a minor. But at this point, I want you to find this kid because some jerk might have changed their hair color, put them in different clothes, you know, because they'll always give them their clothing description of what they were wearing versus what they could be in, what their hair color could be. You know, there's just so many different things. People are malicious. They're going to change all that. And but when you see a picture and this part of the face does not change. And I think it could be done better. That's just me. I think it could be done a lot better. And everybody has to make decisions, but we need to get some of the decisions out of the way when it comes to a mom who is missing their child. Do your best and do what if the mother's like, here's a picture, let's go rock and roll with it. I think that should be enough.
The Amber Alert system really is not necessarily more about the child. It's more about the vehicle the child is in.
And that could change.
And that's right. That's where the complication comes in, is that the idea is to get people that are out there on the roads looking for this car that the child may be in, because of the fact that people may not get a look at the child's face. They may not see certain things, but there's a better chance that they're going to see that car and see that license plate and be able to call it in. And it has resulted in a whole lot of kids being brought home.
Oh, yes.
But there definitely are more factors that could come in to make the system work a little bit better.
Right. Agreed.
The case that you were mentioning earlier, and which would make this a lot more complicated, was based out of Missouri, and the child was removed from the mother while still in utero. So nobody had seen the child's face. The other aspect of that is when you start dealing with things like Amber Alert, if you start putting information out there, we know how the media in general can jump to try to one-up one another. If you've been in an environment in which media is prevalent, and in which I have, you see media a lot of times produce or publish information that's incorrect. And so it kind of always makes me a little bit leery when you've got somebody who's wanting to jump the case. And even looking at this specific situation with Julia and Madeleine, you see all of these opposing theories. It's like, oh, she is her, she isn't her. But nobody's really taking in consideration, I think, at this point, what is accurate, what is truth in the reporting process.
Well, and here's the other thing that we have to look at with this is, regardless of if this is Madeleine or not, and of course the DNA will show that. I haven't heard specifically about them setting up a schedule to do the DNA testing, but both parties have agreed to it. Madeleine's parents and this young lady have both agreed to do it. And good on her for actually stepping up and being willing to participate in that. But if it turns out she's not, I think it's going to go really south for her.
Sad.
But, regardless of if it's her or not, and if there's any validity to it, that Madeleine's parents are already vested in this, that looking at the possibility, that could actually be her, they're probably looking at it and going, we don't want to get our hopes up, but they are.
Oh God, yes. There's no way you wouldn't be, especially considering, and I keep going back to the heterochromia, going back to that one specific detail, what is the likelihood that another young woman, now I understand that she is saying she is 21, and I think that Madeleine would have been 19. So there's a little bit of age difference, in which she's saying that in all actuality, if you were abducted, they might not actually have known how old she was. So that could be made up. But so let's say that you have both parties that have agreed to do this DNA test. What does the process actually look like? I know right now a lot of us are thinking, oh, 23andMe, spitting this and send it off.
No.
What does the process look like?
What you're talking about with 23andMe is a genetic genealogy DNA service, which is the information that was used to catch the Golden State Killer and there was another more recent one I can't think of right off the top of my head. But so what that involves is these are people who submitted a DNA test and submitted it to a third-party company that does DNA testing, and they send it back and they say, okay, well, here's where your genetic structure lies. They tell you a little bit about your background, who the people were that were in your history. Sometimes they even go so deep as to tell you what kind of diseases you might be genetically predisposed to. With a case like this, they are going to go to a direct testing where Madeleine's parents and this young lady will both submit samples, and it will go straight into a DNA testing process to find the markers that say whether she is Madeleine or not. If you're using the third-party services, that information is not readily available. It's something that takes time because law enforcement would have to subpoena that information from those companies and say, we need any links that go to this. So what they're going to do is they're going to go to a DNA lab like any law enforcement investigation would do. When it comes to certain types of investigations, they're going to submit all of those samples directly to investigators that are going to cycle that stuff, and they're going to come back and they're going to either say immediately she is or is not a relative of these people. So there's not anything that's going to get convoluted. Nothing's going to get lost in translation. They will be able to say specifically if she is or is not Madeleine McCann.
So, okay. So the other case that I think that you were, because I know that we talked about this one recently, was the boy in the box. That was
right. That was it. Right.
Yeah. So if it goes through the process, is there anything that us as onlookers need to be aware of that she could possibly do to jeopardize and draw this process, or jeopardize the results and draw this process out longer? Is there anything that Julia could do that would be misleading at this point?
No, because of the fact that in a case like this, investigators will go directly to her. They're not going to say, we need you to send us a sample or something like that. They're going to go directly to her. They're going to take samples. One of the things that Madeleine's family did very early on was they hired private investigation firms to handle certain aspects of this case. And chances are, even if it's not handled by the London Metropolitan Police directly, there will be representatives of the family that are going to specifically go with the intent of collecting the DNA directly from this young lady. So nobody's going to have to worry that she polluted the DNA pool by getting it from somewhere else or something like that. It will be taken directly from her. It will be compared directly to samples that they can verify came from her parents. And then one way or another, they're going to come out and they're going to publicly announce whether this young lady is Madeleine or not.
Yeah,
I just have
crazy public. Like, oh God, like that's a mess. I'm sorry, but that could be messy if it's not.
Absolutely. It's going to be. There's no way that it won't be.
I think it'll be messy either way. I mean, if you think about it, even if it is her, and considering what this girl has possibly been through, I mean, first of all, she's already seeking, whether she's attention seeking or not, or whether it is legitimate that this is, she is trying to find out who she is. It's heartbreaking to consider that this girl has possibly been in a family, and the fact that she is aware of the man that was associated with the SA in the child predator,
right?
Bruckner. But I mean, that's just, I just don't feel like this is going to be a happy ending any way around.
No,
and somebody just realized that she's alive or closure.
Really, one of the things that I've always been fascinated by is cases where, say, a child is kidnapped and they are raised by someone else for their entire life, and then they find out that their parents were kidnappers. There is no going back from that, because you don't get to just be reunited with your family, because usually it's a case where somebody figured it out and they arrested that parent that kidnapped that child. Suddenly the only person you have ever known as a parent has been taken from you. They're put in prison, And now you're being shoved in front of this family and said, well, these are your real parents. They're the ones that you should love. There's never a way to guarantee somebody is going to have happiness in a normal life from that. And this is one of those cases where, given the fact that she claims that there was some abuse that happened down the line, and if she turns out to be Madeleine, there's been such a gap. The parents have missed out on every aspect of this child's life. They're never going to get past that. They're never going to forget that happened.
Is there a possibility that even, let's say it does be, they find out that it is her. Is there a possibility that although they have the answers, they could even almost reject her, saying, I'm sorry, you're not what I thought you were. You're not who I thought you were. You're not really Madeleine. I know the DNA said so, but is that a possibility?
Well, anytime there's been this much of a time period that's passed since someone was taken from somebody and then somebody gets reunited with somebody, they have become a different person. You have the whole environment versus, DNA kind of thing where, yes, you came physically from these people, but you are who you are today because of the environment that you were brought up in. And she is not going to be the child that they intended to raise, which is, one of the hardest aspects of this. They're going to have to realize this is not the Madeleine that you lost 17 years ago. This is a totally different person. And that's a hard thing to get around.
So my question is to everyone, what do we all think? What's our opinion of it? Do you think this might be Madeleine? Or do you think this is a possibly mentally unstable young lady who's playing the game of all attention is good attention, whether it's negative or not? What do we think?
I'm leaning more towards, just the more I see of this and her reactions to things, I am leaning more towards, I think that she is attention seeking. But for the sake of the family, you do want to hold out some shred of hope that this could be the closure that they've been needing for 17 years now. So, but I just can't help but think that, if you come across and start doing this on something like a social media platform versus trying to contact the family directly and saying, listen,
she did. Now, the one thing that you have to keep in mind with this case is that this young lady actually reached out to the police on a couple of different occasions and said, I believe that I am Madeleine McCann. She did not take to social media until the police rejected her claims and didn't do any kind of follow-up with it. And at that point, she felt like she needed to take it to social media in order to be recognized. So yeah, there is some of that where you look at it and go, well, was she just looking for followers? Because she's got over 1 million followers now.
Yeah.
Was that what she was looking for? Or did she do that as a last ditch effort?
I think either way you look at it, whatever is going to happen to this young girl is not going, if they find out she is Madeleine McCann, there's still going to be
a happy ending.
There's not a happy ending, but if she comes out and is just knowing, for those of us who have dealt with online personalities and dealt with trolls, can you imagine what it would be like if it came out that you were lying about it and that you were, we know how vicious that trolls can be online. They're going to eat her alive if she's not.
Yeah, she's going to have to disappear if she's not.
It's going to be very similar, I feel like, to the guy from Cecil Hotel, Morbid, in which he was accused of something. He was accused of being associated with the disappearance and death of
the Elsa Lam death.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's bad.
He got screwed. Oh my God. I felt horrible for him watching that. Okay. Any other comments on it?
Are we still doing personal opinions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Absolutely not. I do not think she is Madeleine McCann.
Why is it that you feel that strongly about it?
Looking at the facial structure, and it's not just the dimple, and it's not just the eye defect. It's the nose, it's the lips, it's just the facial structure at all. The backstory as to, I originally it was my parents won't show me any of this stuff, and now all of a sudden it's, oh well, I do have this stuff. The story's changing.
Mm-hmm.
She knows she's not Madeleine McCann, and maybe there is some mental health issues going on, which I'm very sorry for that. But it ends up leading to stuff like this, where on an episode where we could have been talking about the disappearance of a little girl, we're talking about this person who's claiming that they're this little girl instead of more of the facts that, I don't know, could get the right person to be like, oh, yeah, I remember this one time in Portugal, or wherever.
Right. And if she is doing this for social media following, there's a special place in hell for her.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's too much of the story changing. Too much of it doesn't add up. I don't buy it. Hopefully I'm wrong. I will say that. Prove me wrong and I will be a happy person. And yay, she's been found.
Every once in a while, a case like this comes out where the statistics get proven wrong. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember the name of the young lady that was kidnapped that, like 18 years later, they found her, that she had been kept alive for all this time as a prisoner.
Like Elizabeth Smart or somebody.
Smart.
Yes,
right.
And that was sad.
People were saying from the beginning that she was gone, that she did not survive the first 24 hours of that abduction. And I even heard, when I was a patrol officer, I used to listen to a radio show that Art Bell, after Coast to Coast After Dark, and he had a guy on his show that claimed to be a psychic that was talking about her case specifically, saying that she was deceased, that she was in a body of water somewhere, the typical kind of thing that you get from psychics. She's in water and she's near a bridge, and the safe approach to trying to say that. And then this girl turns up to be alive almost 20 years later. This is one of those cases where your average investigator is saying she's been deceased since 24 to 48 hours after she went missing.
Yeah.
To find out that she's alive would be pretty amazing.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
If she's not her,
there's nothing that, if she's not Madeleine, there's nowhere this girl will be able to get away from this dinner.
She's going to be a target the rest of her life.
Oh, yeah.
I had so many more questions I wanted to ask on this too.
Oh my gosh, I know. And I'm looking at it and realizing that we are officially out of time.
Well, I know you mentioned a suspect earlier. Was it Christian that you mentioned earlier, or was it the other one that was associated with Julia?
I think it's Christian that was associated with Julia. So, because there were quite a few other suspects.
Yeah, there's a lot of suspects in this case.
Well, there's one that's really the German police have named a suspect, and like they really, that's Christian, and they found like the cell phone data, which originally wasn't pulled in the initial investigation. He was like, his cell phone pinged at that location an hour before
he was there.
She was
he
missing.
Was in the area.
And they've ransacked like all of his things. He owned a warehouse, and they've gone through that. They found underneath a pile of his dead dog's bones, buried underneath them in the yard, a bag full of USB drives where not only is it his personal collection he's found online, he does home movies too. Like,
oh yeah.
There's a whole lot more to talk about.
He's a connoisseur.
And I wanted to ask you like specifically about Cuddle Cat. I don't know if you remember Cuddle Cat from the case at all. It was Madeleine's favorite stuffed animal. She slept with it every single night. It was there on the evening she was taken, and police handed it back to the mom, and mom went, "Cool, thanks," and took it home and washed it.
Mom didn't know.
Like,
maybe mom didn't.
Look,
mom didn't know. She didn't understand.
If
everybody
you're a
always
mom,
dropped DNA behind a crime scene.
Here's the thing. I cannot tell you how many cases I worked when it came to rather severe crimes. And to frame this cautiously, major crimes involving ladies. where important evidence was washed away because the first instinct that people have is to cleanse away the evil. It just happens.
Okay, we have a bunch of mothers here, a bunch of parents. If one of your kids went missing and they had a stuffed animal that they slept with every single night, they always had it with them. It smelled like them. I would never in a million years. Would any of y'all?
Well, here's the thing. I don't know what the motivation was behind that, but I do not believe for a second that Madeleine McCann's parents were involved in this.
I don't either, but I'm mad at the police for not taking that into custody and being like, here, dogs, go do the thing.
But once again, we're talking about a foreign police department that from the beginning had a very nonchalant approach to this case. There are a lot of questions about the way things were handled, but it's also something where it's not like this kind of stuff happened every day. And police departments are constantly under fire for not taking the right approach to crimes that they've never been faced with before. And it's really hard to say you should have known better. Yeah. Looking back on it, we say that, but at the time they just wanted to give this lady back this doll.
I mean, honestly, it could have been the only thing that was making her sane at that point. But I mean, I agree with you. I don't understand how a mother would take that and wash away. Because I mean, first of all, we know that if you have ever gone through an experience where you've lost a loved one, that a lot of times you will hang on to an item of clothing, and that smell goes away so quickly and so just that I can't even imagine a family, especially a mother, because I mean you hear things about mothers who have lost a child and they go into their room and it's a shrine exactly the way they left it. The bed is not made. Everything is exactly just some shred of memory for your child. I just, my brain can't wrap around that.
I had more questions, but I'll stop.
This one probably could go on.
We're going to have to circle back on this case after the results come out. Now we're all like following it.
Yeah, the case itself you could talk about for hours and never get a conclusion on it.
Yeah.
Just get angry. That's all you'll do.
Well, I want those DNA results now. I want them for my own.
Yeah, maybe
knowledge.
After this comes out, maybe we revisit this and talk a little bit more in depth.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I would love to do a deep dive just on the case specifically, just this case, to put the facts out there, what we know, what we don't know, what's been disproven, to try and stop looking at the guy walking with the kid with the pajamas. That was his kid. He's on vacation. Because I think that's there's so much conflicting things. It's been 17 years. It'd be really nice to do a deep dive and be like, here's the facts. Here's what people need to know. And if anyone knows who called this guy Christian on this day from the one of those prepaid phone things, I can't even. Yeah,
the burner phones.
The burner phone. Yeah, someone called him, and if they could figure out who that person was, they could prove that he is the person who did this. But right now, I mean, if you have a burner phone, you're probably not the greatest person. You're probably not going to come forward and be like, "Oh yeah, that was me."
You know, Portugal is a beautiful country, and I saw a post that somebody posted recently where they were talking about how incredibly safe and wonderful this place was. We don't lock our doors, and I'm sitting here going, "No, I bet Madeleine McCann's parents wish they had."
Yeah. Oh yeah. It doesn't. I mean, just living in America, and you look at Joe Walsh, who lost this kid in the grocery store one aisle over, you just think that sticks with you. And we just don't let our kids out of sight here because there are just so many creepy weirdos everywhere. So
the Walsh story is the one that stuck with me from a very, very young age.
We grew up with it.
It haunts.
It's terrible.
That one's haunting.
Awful.
Well, and what happened to him? What happened to the child was even it's
worse.
So disturbing. It is so disturbing.
And even to this day, I mean, technically it's solved, but it's not. So
no. Hey guys, I hate to do this. We're 20 minutes over.
Sorry.
Hour-long show. Yeah, just kidding.
Mm.
No. This has been one of those conversations that's been extremely informative, and it's been it's been a great conversation. And from this, I do hope that hopefully somewhere in the near future, Madeleine McCann's family finds closure on this, because that's all I think anybody wants at this point. I know that they have been accused of the crime themselves, and they've done everything I feel like they've done everything that they can to try to get closure on this case. And hopefully this isn't a situation where somebody is taking advantage of them, but yes. Okay. And with that, I'm going to say goodnight and pleasant screams.